People with weird/obscure jobs, what is your job and how did you get the job? I work in a lab where I raise moths. I got it by telling my lab partner that I love bugs and he hooked me up. I'm a house manager for a family of 4, basically I'm a female butler. I've worked for them for 14 years starting as the kids' nanny, they're my second family pretty much. I organize tradespeople, holidays, birthdays, daily meals, dinner parties, housekeeping, the list goes on. It's challenging at times but keeps me on my toes and I enjoy that. I don't know if this is obscure, but my boyfriend is a high-rise window cleaner. There are only 4 in our city. He loves his job. Sometimes when he is working, I will go to the city to the building he is cleaning and look up at him on the street. So cute. Edit, only 4 high-rise window cleaners. We live in a small Canadian city. Also fun fact, one day I was in the city and he was on his lunch break, so he took me on the roof of the tallest building and fucked me doggy style looking over the city. I'm a hostage survival trainer. I was working in international development within IT, and was asked to go and sort out the finance system in Iraq back in 2007. The ministry I was working in got attacked by a militia and myself along with my 4 guards got captured. Over time the guards were killed and I got released in an exchange deal after being held for over 2.5 years. I did an AMA about it some years ago. Concrete petrographer. I just started this month. I studied geology in college and now my job is to look at concrete using petrographic methods I learned at school and conduct ASTM tests to determine quality of concrete. Very interesting work because concrete is engineered rock and there's a lot more to it than you think. You know when you're watching a sports program and you see the little pop graphic in the corner, EA. A baseball player's stats, or an advertisement for Easy Mac, or stay tuned for Saved by the Bell at 9? Yeah. That was me. I updated those graphics and uploaded them to Fox Sports. Since Fox Sports is a 24-hour channel, there's always one guy in the office 24 hours a day. Okay, that's super cool. Do you pre-create all the graphic? How much is done on the fly? I swear, there will be circumstances where a crazy situation happens, and then 10 seconds later there is some super relevant stat that comes up as a graphic. Hi. Whatever sports season it was at the time, NBA, NFL, MLB, etc., I had to get pictures of every major or well-known player for that sport and mask them out in Photoshop. That's so when it's Bulls versus Lakers I would put a Bulls player and LeBron in the graphic. The motion and video would come from Fox who had a dedicated team of 2 motion graphics artists and I'd just swap out the name of the players, the team logos, etc. But then re-render the infographic back to them. Since the channel was on 24 hours, anything could change. So if LeBron got injured, I'd get an email from Fox to swap out LeBron from all Lakers-related commercial graphics for another player. There would be lengthy emails between Fox and Lakers managers on who to display instead, which pictures looked good, etc. And they send me a bunch of images of that new player. I'd also have to update, almost in real time, player stats especially during MLB season whenever so-and-so was at the bat. I have zero interest in sports but after a few months I could tell you the field goal average of nearly every player in the NBA. March Madness was the worst though because you could never be sure who would be playing who next week, so every possible matchup had to be made. The company had 3 computers with 3 of us working at nearly any given point. We get most of our team matchups on the Monday and render out all possible matchups for that week in different versions. The little corner pop-up info, the half-screen pop-up, and then the full-screen pop-up for whatever Fox needed for that week. After around 9 PM there would only be one guy in the studio by himself. He didn't really have to do anything but was there in case Fox needed a sudden change for something that was done previously in the week. A lot of footage for collages needed to be edited, re-rendered, and emailed back in the various screen sizes. Different regions of Fox needed the renders in specific video codexes, so the same infographic would have been rendered out 30 times and sent to each vendor with the specific type of render output for their station. So if the broadcast station in, let's say Tallahassee, Florida transmitted at a certain type of frequency, I'd have to send them the motion graphics at a specific output so it would show up on people's screens properly. Imagine a little pop-up in the corner saying, UFC 217, De La Hoya vs McGregor. Wednesday at 7 p.m. It has an image of De La Hoya and McGregor with some cool motion graphics effect like smoke or something. I'd get the order on Monday, find images of De La Hoya and McGregor. Get the images approved by Fox or whatever, then Photoshop out the fighters and put them in graphics editor. Then I'd retype the match. Wednesday at 7 p.m. Tomorrow at 7 p.m. Today at 7 p.m. Next. Several versions for the date, each done 30 times at the small pop-up. Then another 30 times, each, for the half screen, then finally 30 times each for the full screen. 100 or so renders for one event, but there would be dozens of events each week. NASCAR, UFC, MLB, etc. The worst is when an event was being sponsored by a company, but they vary by region. So I'd have to do all that over again to put sponsored by Don's Dildos or whatever for that region of the country. It sounds crazy busy, but I didn't do anything creative. I just swapped out team names, logos, player images, and logos, and sent them back to the appropriate recipients in the format they needed. Very dull work. 90% of it was rendering and uploading. I quit the job after just a year. I work in a clinical lab where I get to play with baby sweat for a bit of my day. We are testing for chloride level. Increased chloride in sweat is one of the diagnostic markers for cystic fibrosis. I am a clinical laboratory scientist. Not all clinical labs perform this test, but I am lucky enough to work at a lab where we do a couple interesting low-volume tests. I cleaned grills for super rich people in Palm Beach. Even got to clean Michael Jordan's at one point. And it was recommended to me from a friend who was in sobriety with me after I got clean. I used to work on a lavender farm. It's totally unrelated to my field of study and incredibly difficult in terms of manual labor, but man was it a beautiful place. I tended to the plants, took care of goats, and did processing for the herbs and honey. My grandparents are farmers, and so I grew up with mediocre knowledge of field work and beekeeping, and when a friend's mom decided to start a business centered around lavender, she asked me to help out for the summer. I have an anecdote about a lavender farm. Actually not really a lavender farm, but the ranch I grew up on had a lavender field that was cultivated for harvest, pretty small scale at maybe around 100 large plants. My husband and I walked into the field to cut through it from a pasture to the road. We got around 10 feet in and then we heard t-t-t-t-t-t-t-t-t-t-t-t-t and we froze. Anyone who's encountered that sound recognizes it instantly and your blood just runs cold. Sure enough, a rattlesnake was coiled and staring at us under the closest lavender plant, a couple feet away at most from our bare ankles. Then we heard it again, only this time on the other side of the plant. Slowly looked down as we crept backwards towards the fence, and we saw not one, not two, but a fucking nest of rattlers under that plant. Then the sound spread. First that bush, then the ones on each side, and soon the entire field was a chorus of rattling. It sounded just like heavy rain. We got our backs to the wood fence and climbed up to the top slat, and crawled along the upper fence as high as we could get off the ground. Not sure how far it was, but maybe 75 feet, edit, I meant to get out of the field, not 75 feet high lol, and the whole time this beautiful, soft field of lovely lavender flowers had come alive and was pulsing and swaying with hundreds and hundreds of rattlesnakes. Every bush was vibrating and home to its own nest of rattlers. It was absolutely terrifying. I grew up in the California countryside, so I am far from a stranger to rattlesnakes and snakes in general. I had never before and have never since seen anything like it. I knew they could form nests, but this was a scale unlike anything I would have thought possible. I've experienced some sketchy shit out there with wild animals like mountain lions, boars, and snakes of all kinds, but that was by far the freakiest shit I've ever seen in the country, and it permanently made me a little nervous around lavender plants. This was just about 20 minutes from San Jose BTW, not some remote area deep in Central California. It's crazy how close you are to that kind of wildness when you're in one of the most populated urban areas in the country. I'm a potter. Not sure if that fits the bill for weird. I used to be the manager for a museum art school, and began taking classes there years ago. Eventually transitioned into being a full-time potter and pottery teacher. You're a potter, Harry. I spent a year on a team reclassifying the Duke University library system from Dewey Decimal to Library of Congress. Had to learn like 4 different alphabets just to label them properly. Edit, Holy Mother. Didn't think anyone would care, but I can explain a couple of things. 1. Duke University has one of the largest research libraries in the world with millions of books. In addition to the main library, we went through engineering, biology, art and divinity. There was also another main library on East Campus. The whole operation took about 2 years, I think. I was there from December 2006 to February 2008 when the project ended. 2. The Dewey Decimal System works perfectly well for small American libraries that cater to an English-speaking, Judeo-Christian populace. The Library of Congress system is more egalitarian and perhaps more importantly, has unassigned sections for disciplines that have not yet been discovered. Large university libraries and other world-class collections are better served by the LOC system. 3. I don't quite remember the number of people on our team, but it was about 15 of us doing the physical labor. We were a company that did contract work for libraries. We mostly labeled books, scanned barcodes and reshelved. 4. The reason I learned those alphabets was because we had to meet production and the barcode sheets only used the Latin alphabet. Most of the time the barcodes on the book and the labels matched, but sometimes they didn't or were missing altogether, and then you'd have to waste precious time figuring out what was going on. I'd scope ahead when we were about to hit a section in another writing system to make sure I was prepared. Past job, I worked at a whorehouse. I was the receptionist. Guys would come and I'd buzz them in after confirmation of their appointment from the intercom. They would enter, check ID, get their water or pop, take payment. Then I'd call the girl from the intercom and they would lead him to the room. It is technically an adult massage parlor. I applied off Craigslist. Went for the interview. Only real rule was receptionist cannot become escorts and escorts cannot after chose to be reception. I recently started working in a carrot factory. I stand at a conveyor belt as carrots roll past me and pick out all of the moldy ones. How did I end up in this job, you ask? I decided to do an arts degree and now have no career prospects. In all seriousness though, I work with a lot of migrant workers who work extremely hard doing a job they are accused of coming to this country and stealing. They are lovely people who take a lot of care while dealing with the food products, and they deserve all the respect in the world for continuing to work hard during the pandemic. I very nearly had the same job in a pineapple factory. I passed the interview and physical tests, then they noticed I had kitchen experience and put me in the cafe instead. Then they learned I can't use an industrial coffee machine to save my life, so I got bumped over to the outlet store. I still met a lot of the process workers, many of whom were from the Philippines or Indonesia, and were lovely women. Very practical, too. Mine isn't necessarily weird, but how I fell into it was. Around 10 years ago I was working in the IT industry. I decided to help my dad out one weekend sell hunting gear at a military expo, basically antique military gear and army disposal. One of the sellers had a vampire killing kit. Knowing very little about antiques at the time, I pulled out each piece, checking them over. The story checked out, did some research on my phone throughout the day and found out that it could be a fake in 2 ways. It could be a kit put together by someone out of antique pieces to make it seem real. And technically, even if it was authentic, it was a Victorian fake. With the fear of vampires in the late 19th century, con men put together vampire killing kits and sold them to rich businessmen visiting Europe. What stood out to me though was the main reason I bought it. In the middle of the kit was a crucifix with an ivory inlay, that doubled as a goddamn percussion pistol. Long story short, I took a chance, spent $1,000 on it and got persecuted by my father for such a dumb move. I didn't have much in my savings at the same. I took it to Ripley's Believe It or Not in Australia and they flew someone out from the US to look at it, which was pretty exciting. Within 5 minutes of looking at it, they offered me a ridiculous sum of money for what I thought was a large investment to begin with. While in ways I do regret selling the kit, it allowed me to start a career in the antiques trade. 5 years later I moved to the UK to study a degree, and now I specialize in rare obscure antiques that have allowed me to travel all around the world sourcing new weird objects. P.S. Don't worry, I gave my dad a cut of the vampire kit profits for believing in me. In the summer I guard and clean the toilet units, not the toilets, for festivals. I got the job trying to find a cheap way to go to the big festivals, and this organization was looking for volunteers. So all I have to do is stand in front of the units, make sure the ground stays clean, everyone had toilet paper, and clear a block of units so the cleaning team can do their job. Another part of the job is making sure no one dies or passes out in such an unit. You can't imagine how many drunk, often naked, people we need to get out of these units and escort them to the first aid. I have a job tracking rodents in restaurants. I set up cameras, movement sensors, IR sensors and other gear, and get an idea of the problem and how to fix it. Here's a video of a couple of teenage girls checking out one of my cameras. Sometimes I'm in a hot roof area of a restaurant trying to get the super rats to back off and let me work. I use a Bluetooth speaker and Prodigy on full volume. Who knew rats don't like Prodigy? Despite that, I love my job and the pay is pretty good. I worked in a restaurant with a rat problem. A very popular, extremely busy restaurant with dozens of rats running around at any given moment. The location was a perfect storm of roof rats, garbage rats from the underground dumpsters, and ocean rats from being nearby a popular tourist beach spot. There were multiple traps under every booth, and they were triggered so often, that every morning the openers would have to pull apart every booth and a best guy would clear them all and reset. The smell of a dead rat is so unique, what makes it different than other dead animals, but I could pick it out of a blind smell test. I work in QC, quality control, for media. In one company they occasionally paid me to watch porn to make sure it was in sync and in good quality for video on demand distribution. In another company I spent years watching movies before release in secure theater-like rooms, to make sure the files are ready for distribution, subtitles and audio in sync, no picture corruptions, stuff like that. I always got to watch the biggest movies of the year in a giant screen weeks before they were released, sometimes months. I got the job by going to film school. I mix fire retardant for fighting wildfires. A lot of people know that airplanes drop retardant on fires but don't think about the millions of dollars of infrastructure that is behind that operation. Everyone who works at my base started by working at the local ski resort. It's a good way to earn enough money in the summer to coast all winter, so we keep the jobs among fellow ski bums. I'm an assistant curator in numismatics. Basically I manage our museum's collection of ancient coins. It's a small museum, which explains why I even have this job, as I'm not a professional numismatist, but we have a pretty sizable collection of mostly Roman coins. But we also have Greek, Hellenistic, Byzantine, medieval European, Chinese, Islamic, and Crusader Kingdom coins. I catalog coins, appraise them, do any research that is required and help incorporate coins into our exhibits. I also do educational outreach, so I hold workshops for our volunteers and the public. I work with professors in the history and archaeology departments of the university we're attached to in order to help them incorporate numismatics into their curricula. Edit, forgot to add how I got this job. Basically I came to university and decided to volunteer with the museum because I like history. I did tech support for the first year and then the director asked me if I would like to train in numismatics. I said sure. 5 years later here I am managing the collection. Full-time in the summer and part-time during the academic year. For 4 years I was a fake priest in Japan. I first worked for a company making $90 to $100 for a 15-minute ceremony. When I found out I could cut out the middleman, I started on my own and started making 200 a wedding. I remember one day I had 6 weddings back to back and made 1,200 in a day. This was huge back when I was living in an English teacher salary in Japan. It was so much fun. The brides were more than often super hot and so were many of the guests. I felt like Jesus but kind of dirty. There was one time when the Japanese family was actually Christian and they freaked me out when they actually started singing along with our hymns. I had to remember not to make the Catholic cross gesture cause I was dressed like a Protestant. It really threw me off my game. One time I had to read a scripture in Dutch. I told the organizer that I don't speak Dutch and they told me just to make it up, so I went full Swedish chef and everyone loved it. It was definitely one of the coolest and easiest money jobs I have ever had. I also got huge discounts and free parking at the hotel I worked at along with free bento lunches each day I worked. 10/10ths would do it again. Working in college student affairs is kinda weird, what I do. Most go to school for a master's degree to enter the field, but it's a job or profession that no one talks or knows about until they stumble/fall into it towards the end of their undergraduate career. It's laughable how many in the field have this story. It was my senior year of undergrad, and I was just a couple months from graduating and work in X field with my degree. My on-campus job supervisor approached me and asked, "You're really good at this, have you considered working in student affairs as a career?" I said no, what's that? They explain it's what they do, and what they got their masters in. I said you can go to school for a master's and do what we do as a career? They said yes, so I said, son of a bitch, I'm in. Now I'm here. My dad told me of this one time he went to my mom's work Christmas party, she was a banker. As the bankers talked shop and tried to sound impressive, the spouses grew bored and talked among themselves. The guy who drew the biggest crowd was this man who worked at a toilet factory and he did quality control. His job was to flush toilet paper and simulated poop down the toilet. The people at the party, especially the men, were riveted by his descriptions and peppered him with questions while all these upper management bankers looked on with irritation. I'm a Chiron operator. I trigger motion graphics on live TV. I was an art student and also was in stage crew in high school. These things got me jobs backstage in theater, which got me a job in TV doing normal stuff like cameraman and stuff like that. Since I was an art major I asked if I could do graphics and they let me on the weekends, and my specialty eventually turned to the Chiron, which ingests the graphics that artists make and plays them back through the switcher that controls the news broadcast. It's not technically an art position, but at my job specifically I could make the graphics in After Effects and Photoshop during the day, if I have a computer free, and in the afternoon I play the Chiron. Usually you are one or the other, because Chiron operators don't need art skills, it's just another tech job like audio operator or camera operator or stage manager or whatever. These kinds of jobs are getting rarer because they are being automated. But since I'm also an artist I get to keep my job because if someone leaves I can take their job. I manage a motel and marina in a vacation town in Wisconsin. We're directly on a large lake and we're popular because golf around here is good and we offer a free boat slip to any guests with boats. So fishermen and boaters can keep their boats on the water throughout their stay. It's not very common to have a motel that does this. I got the job because my parents live in the area and they sent me a photo of the job listing. It said the manager gets to live for free on the lake in an expensive town in a 3-bedroom 2-bathroom apartment. I have 2 associate's degrees in IT, but I did it out of practicality and not passion. I have an appointment to take my drone part 107 test and I want to start my own drone business. Shameless plug, futureflightfilms.com. I also get to take our rental pontoons out when I have some free time. Work is crazy in the summer, but in the off season it's so slow and I have a lot of downtime, which is nice. My boss is great and doesn't helicopter. The pay isn't amazing at $25K/year, but since I don't have to pay rent, mortgage, or utilities, I do pretty well, and during the virus I had the job security and steady pay, so I was very fortunate. Edit, mobile format for my website sucks. I don't have my part 107 yet, so I haven't put the final touches on the site or updated the photos in a minute.